Right, we're live now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Why Read discussion series. We are on episode number 30, and I have a returning guest today, Theo, Rekindled reader. And we also have here for the first time joining me, Brian from BellTube. So I'm just so thrilled to have these two guests here with me today. Hello. How are you?
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for having me back, by the way.
You're welcome.
With
Yes.
Brian. I'm so excited. Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I already messed up with my first rule, which is that I always usually start with the first question being the why read question. I already asked,
hmm
how are you? So I broke my rule this time again. But
honestly, whenever you put me on a stream, count on it becoming discombobulated. So it's like mini Allen energy in a way. So yeah, thank you for having me so much. This is a blast. I've seen, I think, all 29 of your prior Y reads. So it's awesome to be part of this. I've never had a chance to talk to Theo in a live conversation before. So this is exciting for me as well. And yeah, I love these because can just answer questions and participate in the communications. So
Yeah.
I love it.
yes, and I want to say hello to Kale, hello to Polly and Vero,
Hi,
and to
guys.
John, and to everybody who's there in the chat today.
John.
Hello. So good to see you all. Hello, Alicia, and hello, Gavin. So wonderful to have some wonderful people in the chat here today. And so this
Absolutely.
series, yeah, and I'm just so excited because we always start here with the why read question. And the beauty of this question is that there is no right answer and that your answer can change depending
That's
on
my
different
kind of
things.
exam because I didn't study for this at all.
Yeah.
So, you know,
It's
that's
not a
my kind of
test.
test. Okay.
No, it's not a
Perfect.
test. And your answer can change, which is the nice thing about this series. So
hmm
I know I actually looked up today, Theo, what you said the last time you were on the Why Read discussion series.
That's smart.
That
I should have done that. Yep.
I am curious to see if that answer has changed. And it might not have, and it's fine. But I'd love to hear in today's age, with so many distractions, with so many pastimes, with so many things pulling for your attention,
hmm
what inspires you to pick up a book?
You know, I find as I get older, I find that I have less and less time, like you said. So I'm trying to focus my energy on the things that I enjoy the most, but also that I derive the most value from. And I'm starting to get the most value from reading. I think maybe because, it fits my lifestyle more. I can kind of read audio, like listen to audio on the go or sit down with a book and read snippets at a time. Whereas I feel compelled to sit down and watch let's say a movie or a show start to finish. And, it takes a little bit more time, but also more important than that, I think it's more about the journey that a book gives me. Like I just get more out of it. And I find that I retain a lot more of that feeling for longer after reading a book. And honestly, part of it comes down to just wanting to train my brain and just be a better reader. Like I want to be able to read more, read faster, absorb more information, train my memory. I spent a long time in academia and studying a lot of stuff, and it just like fried my brain for a long time, and I couldn't read for enjoyment for a long time. And I started realizing that I really do enjoy it and I miss it. And so the more I do it, the more I enjoy it. And it's sort of just a perpetual thing. So really it comes down to just I enjoy it more at this stage in my life. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good, like I said, as good an answer as any. And I can relate to that as well. I do enjoy doing other activities now and then. I just
hmm
started playing a video game with my husband, for example,
Nice.
and that's fun. And I like being
Yeah.
able to connect with my husband in that way. But it's not something that I'll sit down and think about afterwards or have a big deep
Totally.
conversation about, or any of those things. So I
Yeah.
definitely can relate to feeling like you can absorb the content of a book in a different
hmm
way, and it does challenge the memory too. I
For
think
sure.
more
Yeah.
than some
Yeah.
other media, perhaps.
Totally.
So, yeah. And what about you, Brian? How would you answer the why read question?
Um, it's probably a two-part answer. First, I'd like to. John is asking why I say his name like Jerry. It says Newman because I can't believe you didn't take the day off today with Joanna's live stream. One would have thought if
No.
if she was truly important to you, John, you'd have taken the day off. Okay, I'm kidding. Love
My
John.
little elf ears are drooping.
That's right. My brother from the South. Anyway, so I'm going to give you a two-part answer, if that's okay. I started reading really early in life, and it was entirely for entertainment. I just found such joy in it, and it was something that I was really good at. So there was a self-confidence boost
Mhm.
for me because I'm not a big guy, right? I wasn't out on the football field. I wasn't out on the basketball court, but I could read more complicated material and I could read faster than anybody in my class. And so it was like this enjoyment, yet a point of pride for me as well. And you got to remember back then there was barely any cable TV, certainly no internet. So in terms of entertainment distractions, reading was kind of what was available at the time, particularly here in Minnesota when it's 30 below 3 months out of the year.
Mhm.
So that was then. I'm going to say now it's totally different. I do get enjoyment from reading, but it's a little bit like I'm going to say like real life. I find myself under a lot of stress just because I've been an entrepreneur for the last 20 some years, and that can be quite challenging. And I have found a comfort level in reading like nothing else. It's much more so than watching a movie, much more so than watching TV, even going for a walk. When I read, and it really doesn't even matter what genre or if it's a complicated book, if it's a short novella, if it's what I'm reading right now, and Malazan, it doesn't really matter because my mind is elsewhere. And it is such incredible stress relief for me that it is not only enjoyable, but it's therapeutic. So I think that's kind of why I read right now. And plus, I just love these stories. And part of me feels like there's a little bit of FOMO when I know that you've read all of Malazan and sitting here almost done with book two. I want to know what happens. I want to be able to talk about this stuff with my new BookTube friends. So that's a big part of it too.
Yeah, I mean, we can't deny just the excitement and value of having discussions about books and that being an enriching experience. But that's a really wonderful answer though, Brian, because I know that there's actually some research about how books can actually have a calming effect. Reading can have a calming effect on the mind.
Hmm.
I was just watching a video earlier today. I think it was like from 3 years ago or something, but it was about some study about reading before bed and how reading
Mhm.
before bed can have a calming response on the brain and allow you to sleep more, I guess, more peacefully.
Do you
So,
Well,
think that applies to even if you're reading something very fast paced, you're in the middle of a battle scene, does that have a different effect than watching that through a visual medium? Like, does that trigger the brain differently? Because I find that even if I'm reading a fast paced book or if it's a thriller or if I'm in the middle of something really suspenseful, I find that I'm enjoying it, but I'm still sort of in that calm, almost meditative state. Whereas if I come out of a movie and there's explosions and things are happening, like I'm almost elevated to a point of discomfort sometimes, depending on time of day. It's not really what I want to do at 11 o'clock at night, but a book
mhm.
doesn't really matter. I love it. So I'm wondering how that affects people differently. You know what I mean?
that's a good question. I'll let
Well,
Brian respond, and then I'll
I,
have
Yeah.
more.
I would think in some regard it's a matter of how many senses you're engaging. So
Oh,
when
yeah.
you are reading, you're engaging your visual, um, and your imagination is going, and that can
Hmm.
certainly impact your subconscious dreaming. I know it does for me, depending on. I read Paranasi and dreamt about it for 3 straight nights afterwards because
Yeah.
it was just such an atmospheric, weird thing that it hit my subconscious different. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think if you are watching a thriller or an action or a big battle scene or, horror or whatever before you go to bed, the more senses that we engage, I think the more our adrenaline can spike. And that might affect overall restfulness and stress reduction and all those kinds of things.
It's a good point. That's a good point. And I
Yeah.
also wanted to touch on what you said before about, just getting enjoyment out of books. I know friends that are very, they're just movie buffs, right? They love film and they don't read a whole lot. Every now and then they'll read a book that has an adaptation, right, to compare or whatever, but they get the most enjoyment out of a movie or a visual, whatever. I find that I get the most now out of books. And so it's funny how different people can derive different levels of enjoyment and get more value one way or another through different medium. I think that's very interesting. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think that in some regard, TV and theater, we are really reliant on the director's pace for how we consume the product. Whereas when we're reading, we're relying on our own pace. So if we want to,
Yeah.
blast through 200 pages, great. If we want to read 3 paragraphs and put it down for
Yes,
3
that's right.
weeks, the story continues. So I like having the control of the pacing
Me too.
better
Me too.
in a novel.
Yeah, me too.
That's really interesting. That's really, really interesting.
Mhm.
Just going back though to the type of stories and reading at night, I have noticed that some stories do affect my ability to sleep more than others. And I sometimes read some dark material, and I have noticed that sometimes that's not always best for me to fall asleep.
Mhm.
Sometimes it does make me a little bit stressed out. It just depends, though. It really does. It really does depend. But at the same time, I don't know, it's so strange because I can see how it's calming, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the answer to this because sometimes I do
Mhm.
get a stress response when I read, but it's not in a bad way. It kind of reminds me of like a study I heard about once when it came to animals and how animals in the wild, they will play with each other, right? So they'll rough play with each other, but that play actually has a benefit for them in which they are using their bodies, they're using their hormones in such a way, their stress response in such a way that they're prepared whenever they encounter a real dangerous situation in the wild, that it actually is good for them. And I'm like, oh
Mhm.
wow, they're processing things. They're getting rid of certain aggressions, but they're also helping them to respond more naturally in stress responses. And so I was like thinking, I wonder if reading has something similar for us where even though we do go through stress throughout the day, maybe sometimes we can't outwardly process it. And
Mhm.
then reading about a stressful situation or something kind of conflict uh, helps us to process that. But like you were saying, Brian,
Mhm.
when you're reading, there might be a different way of being able to take time processing that versus with the show, you're really at the director's pace.
Mhm.
That's just
Yeah.
me talking off the top of my head. I'm not
Well,
sure.
you've
Yeah.
inspired me to throw some punches at some of my books later tonight as a playful
Well, I was just
mechanism.
gonna say
Yeah.
that's sort of why people are so, into sports, right? Like sports allows you to get out that sort of aggression and that stress and build that camaraderie and build sort of a team and go to war, right? And then like not have to really do it. That's why I do jujitsu, because it's mental, it's physical, it's a stress reliever, that's such a challenge, and you can go there and feel as though you're training towards something and set aside the day-to-day, the stress, the whatever, and come home and not have to live that actual life, right? A life of conflict.
Mhm.
You can just sort of leave it there on the mats, and it's cool. It's a cool way to set aside the rest of it. And it's funny that you said when you read a stressful passage or something dark or something whatever, living vicariously through that moment in the book can not only help you deal with your own, but maybe sometimes just set it aside for a while. You know what I mean? And that's what's good for, that's why I like reading, because it of course the escapism is one of the main answers, right? We all do it for that reason. But why and when, right? And how does it help? So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And since you mentioned jinjitsu, is that how you say
Mhm.
it? The
Jujitsu, yeah. Yeah.
jujitsu. I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
mispronounced it.
That's okay.
Um, have you found that any of those skills have transferred into your reading life? I know that sounds like a weird question, but I know that
Actually,
martial arts. Go ahead.
it's funny that you say that. So the short answer is like not really. But I do find that it affects my enjoyment of fight scenes, particularly action scenes. I've been doing martial arts since I was like 4 or 5 years old, and I've done plenty of them. Jiu-jitsu is what I've done as an adult that I've really fallen in love with. When I read a fight scene, particularly a hand-to-hand combat scene, sometimes it just doesn't work in my head the right way, because I'm just too maybe versed in what that's supposed to look or feel like. And so, yeah, that can pull me out a little bit, but really on the whole, no, not really. I don't have any experiences, I don't think, in my life which is a good thing, that detracts from the way that I'm able to read or enjoy or anything like that. But it's those funny little things. For example, somebody really learned, or, like a scientist in a specific field will read something about that field and go, well, that's not really how it works, or that's not how I would do it, or whatever. So in those instances, kind of, right? But not really.
I wonder though about like jujitsu and other martial
Mm.
arts and yoga, that I wonder if there's a practical bodily benefit for reading, just because
Hmm.
when you are doing martial arts, you're stretching a lot. And if you are
Mhm.
doing any type of kicking or whatever, your hamstrings are engaged, your glutes are
Mhm.
engaged. And these are muscles and joints that, depending on our reading position, if we're sitting on a couch or we're sitting on a chair or reading in
Totally.
bed,
Oh
um,
yeah.
I bet you the more you put into physical fitness, where revolves stretching and being limber,
Yeah.
probably benefits your reading in ways that you don't even realize, because you're not in pain.
That's true.
Where somebody else might be, God, my back kind of hurts a little bit,
Oh, yeah.
sitting in this chair,
Totally.
or my
Blood's flowing to
legs.
the brain, you're thinking
Right.
everything's working. Yeah, totally.
Right. So I bet you
Yeah.
there's a bit of an indirect benefit, specifically in martial arts, that's different than weightlifting, because you
Yes,
are
it
so
is very
focused
different.
and
You are right.
flexible.
I will
Yeah.
say, like, I played some sports. I was an only child, so I did a lot of like solo sports too. Not a lot of team sports. My parents didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have the money for hockey and things like that. But I did a lot of different sports growing up, and martial arts was the one that, I'm 6'3" right now, about 240 pounds. Like, I'm a big dude, and I'm very flexible, actually. Maybe not so much now, but over the last few years, like, definitely, I'm pretty flexible, and I'm pretty quick for a big guy, and that, I think, is really from the martial arts specifically, not so much other sports, but ones that focus on those things. I know people, my wife did ballet her whole life. She's 37, turning 37 years old. And she's, you know what I mean? Like, she's like a 20-year-old. Like, she's
Hmm.
flexible, she's energetic, and specific activities, I think, build those skills, right? And keep your body a certain way. And that must help cognitively, right? It
I
has
think
to
so.
translate. Yeah.
Well, if you're 6'3", 240 plus, when I recruit my inevitable tug of war team, you're coming in right after Tom Orange and maybe Jimmy. But
Totally.
you're there,
Totally.
brother. You're there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were that tall, Theo, because
I'm not small. Yeah. Yeah.
because for those of you who don't know, Theo was part of a group called Grimoire, which I was part of for a while there, a
Yes.
Discord, and this was along with Tall Guy Reads with Alex and with RJ, who he had on his live show last night.
Yeah.
I didn't get to watch live show live. I was watching some of the replay this morning, but
I
yeah,
did.
I
I
mean, I
did.
know RJ and
They're
Alex
both really
are known
big.
for being
Yeah.
really tall, but I didn't know
Yeah.
you're also super tall.
Yeah. So now Alex, Tall Guy Reads, he's like is it 6'8"? I think he's
I don't
six
know.
eight or something
Wow.
stupid. Like, he's very tall. And RJ is, yeah, 6 something, like probably my height for sure. 6'4", 6'3", somewhere there. Yeah. So we're all pretty coincidentally all really big dudes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
I'm
amazing.
unfortunately the biggest probably, but it is what it is. We all have our
It's like-
problems we're working
It's
with.
like Beard of Darkness is like 6'5", and you would never
Yeah,
know
there's
it.
some big guys.
Watching
Yeah.
him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were
I asked
teasing,
Jimmy the other day how tall he was, and I had imagined him being taller, actually,
Yeah.
because his wife is so petite. And he did a live with his wife, and it's just the
Yeah.
contrast was hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
So he's
picture
tall,
on
but
my
not that
Instagram
tall.
of me standing next to Jimmy, and then you'll see how short I am.
Okay, I gotta look at
uh,
that. Yeah.
but yeah, he's tall to me. He seems tall to me, but I'm
Sure.
short for scale. We were teasing Philip Chase about how he's much shorter than we thought he would be. Like, he's not short, but he's
But he
definitely
looks like a
not
slender,
He
tall
does
guy,
look
doesn't
tall. I think the
Yeah.
way that he
Really tall.
carries himself and his posture is like
Yeah.
perfect.
He's 2 feet
that-
of confidence for sure.
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
what it
Yeah.
is. That's what
Yeah,
it
he's
is.
very, very uplifted when he talks.
Yeah.
So.
Yes.
Yeah. And he said he's traveling right now. So if we do the Beowulf 3 times rule, it might have a
Yeah,
delayed
it might. Yeah, it's true.
response. So had to share that. Yeah. So hooray for short people. And we do
Yes.
have a question here, and I'll go ahead and highlight it here. So the question for the panel: what male author do you think is best at writing female characters? This is such a hard question. And what
Oh,
female author is best at writing male characters? I think if I
man.
had to choose a female author who is really, really good at writing male characters, I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say Robin Hobb, based
Hmm.
on my experience with the Farseer trilogy.
Robin Hobb is very good. That's a great answer, actually. I'm thinking of authors as we speak. How about, okay, I'll think. You guys, Brian, do you have an
Sure.
answer?
I do. Well, I mean, the female author, a couple that come to mind. Certainly Robin Hobb. I've a huge fan of all of the Realm of the Elderling books. I think Tori Tekken writes male
Mm,
characters really well. Um, and she should be in the conversation because she does spend quite a bit of time figuring out, she gets so annoyed out sometimes how male authors write female characters. I think she's very conscientious about opposite sex
yeah,
writing,
she
and I
is.
think she
Yeah,
I think she
yeah.
does a really great job there. I've only read To Ride Hell's Chasm, so
Oh,
I
that's
don't
a good
have a
one.
big database of knowledge of Jenny works, but I have to think she knows what she's doing when it comes to just characters in general. So I'll throw her in the mix. Regarding male authors who write female characters well, trickier.
Hmm.
Definitely, maybe not some of the bigger ones. I think if we go YA, I think Rick Riordan writes female characters pretty
Oh,
good. I would say Gotta look at my books.
yeah, me too. Trying to think.
Gosh.
So I would go ahead and echo all that too. I think that George R. R. Martin, as Rick the Reader says here, is also excellent with female characters, in my opinion. And I also think that Stephen Erickson is really good at
Hmm.
writing female characters, especially. I mean, there are some really good female characters in Gardens of the Moon, and then developing into Dead House Gates. But actually, some of my favorite female characters in that series, I think, are introduced from in book 5, and then they just develop. Even the ones that were brought into the early in the series developed so much over the course of the series, and I felt like they were just they seemed so realistic to me personally.
Hmm.
So I
You
like
know,
he did.
I can't believe I forgot this one. Philip Chase. Philip
Oh,
writes great female characters. So yeah, and he introduces one in his third book, which
yeah.
basically for me stole the show. So yeah, I'm gonna throw him in on the mix.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's interesting because he has female characters on all of his covers, but the main
Yeah,
character of the series is not female. So
right.
I have to read
Yeah.
the Adan books. Yeah, I need to get to. I have the first two. Yeah. I was gonna say I was gonna agree wholeheartedly with Hobb, and one that just came to mind was Fonda Lee, actually, because I
Mhm.
remember reading through the entirety of the Greenbone saga, which is really, I mean, there's some amazing female characters, right? And some amazing fight scenes, martial arts scenes as well, which I loved. But the male characters, which it revolves around some of the males taking over these crime families, and actually there's some, like I said, female leads as well. But the males were done so well, and it just felt really authentic. And it just, I don't know, I resonated with some of them of different ages as well for different reasons. And I just that was a very good series. So she's definitely one for sure
I totally agree, and
for
I
me.
can't believe I forgot to think of Greenbone Saga
That was such a
because
good one. Yeah,
yeah, and all of those male characters have such
they're all
realized and
different
unique
too.
voices. Yeah,
Yes.
they're just really unique from each other.
Yeah, there's young kids,
Lan
there's
and
old
Hilo is
guys,
just
there's,
yeah.
yeah, it's very good. Yeah.
And the grandfather who doesn't want to give up,
Yes.
the captaincy of the family. So
Yeah,
yeah, all of
yeah.
it.
And I think she's such a good writer where that could have been a male or a female, and it would have worked. Any of those
Hmm.
characters could have been gender swapped, and it would have worked
Hmm.
because she's so good. But the way that it all played out and the roles that each one had, I feel like it worked perfectly, and it was good. It felt really authentic. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I think even in book 3, she does a little gender swapping. I think I don't remember which daughter it was, but she really kind of has Hilo sensibilities. Um,
yes,
and I think your point is excellent there that you can absolutely gender swap them. But yeah, I'm gonna
yeah,
agree with the wise Theo on that one.
yeah. So there were actually a lot of authors that could hit
yeah.
this
The males
question,
are
I
harder.
think.
I'm struggling to. I'm careful what I say because every now and then I'm like, ooh, that's a really good character from this author, right? From a Brandon Sanderson, from a Stephen King, but I know that on the whole, they're maybe not known for doing that well. So I don't know.
Yeah.
That one's a tricky one. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's
It's a
kind of hit. I
really
find it's hit
tricky
or miss
answer.
for
Yeah,
me.
it's a tricky
Yeah.
answer for sure. And
Yeah.
It's a
like,
great
for
question.
example, yeah, I mean, and everyone relates to characters differently and looks for different things.
Absolutely.
So, like, for
Yeah.
example, I loved Jahane in The Lines of Alrasan by Guy Gavriel
Mm.
Kay. Thought she was a stellar female character, but I know some people might, they might not resonate with that book, or,
Yeah.
that might not be what they
What
go
about
for.
George R. R. Martin, Joanna? I know you're a huge A
Oh,
Song of Ice and
I
Fire
already
fan.
mentioned him. I mentioned him
Yeah,
earlier
yeah,
with
yeah.
the
Right.
reader.
Yes,
Yes,
that's right.
he's definitely, well, I did a top 15 favorite female characters video, that's here on my channel from a couple of weeks ago, and I actually did, I need to, this is a good opportunity to talk about that, because I'm not very proud of that video. I left off someone who is such an amazing female character that I regret, and the female character that I didn't mention is Yennefer from The Witcher.
Oh,
I
Mm.
she's so good.
love Yennefer, and I love Cersei too from, or is it Ciri? Now I'm forgetting the name. Ciri? I think it's Ciri from The Witcher.
Yeah, it's Siri.
Oh, Ciri. Yeah,
Ciri?
Cirilla.
I
Yeah.
loved that character too. Now, it's been a long time since I've read the Witcher books, but I did read all the Witcher
That's a
books.
good example, Joanna.
Mhm.
That's a good example,
Excellent.
actually. He
So,
does them pretty well.
I wasn't terribly high on the Witcher series as a whole, at the time,
Same.
and part of it could have been timing, I'm not sure, but the characters stuck with me,
Yeah.
and I still think about them to this day, and that was a huge omission on my part. I really should have mentioned Yennefer. She was a standout, she was incredible, loved that character so much. But yes, obviously, I love George R. R. Martin, and if you watch my top 15, spoiler alert, a certain character
He's
in A
up
Song of
there.
Ice and
Yeah,
Fire
yeah.
gets number 1. So,
Amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
still need to do my top 15 male characters of all time, and there are so many as well. And I would also agree that, especially in the second series, in the second Apocalypse series, it starts out with a trilogy, the Prince of Nothing trilogy, and
Mhm.
then goes into a 4-book series afterwards. There's a particular female character that is moving up the ranks for me. I love what he's doing with this character. And actually, there are a couple of female characters that are incredibly well
That's a
written.
priority series for me. And I talked about it with the boys last night. That one is one that's high on my list. And I recorded I think it's a top 10 kind of priority series, like ones that I'm going to be getting to before anything else. And that's on it for sure. So
Yeah,
good to hear
it's
that.
I can
series
only
I'm always
dream.
so hesitant to recommend because it's so
Yeah.
dark. Yeah.
I can only dream. I mean, it's certainly also on my, top TBRs to get to, but honestly, I don't see it even coming close to happening at the very earliest 2026. Probably longer, because I've still got 8 main
There's so much.
Malazan books to go. Then I'm starting the Wars of Light and Shadow in January, and there's zero chance I'm going to be doing R. Scott Baker at the same time I'm doing Jenny Wirtz. I mean,
I'm doing it, and it's hard.
I don't know how you do it. I mean, well, you're smarter than I am. That's one of the reasons.
I'm just going
But-
so slowly. I mean, like, we've been reading The Wars of Light and Shadow, Philip and I, for the last
Yeah.
couple of years, and just going through very slowly at the same time. So we're just taking our
Yeah.
time.
I
But we're
mean,
enjoying it. That's the thing, is I think if we tried to push through like a book a month or even 2 months,
yeah.
I don't think it would be as enjoyable for either of us. I
Well-
was watching this actually on Theo's chat last night about how you guys were saying that maybe a Malazan read along isn't really
the
the
best
best way
idea.
to approach that
Yeah.
series, which
Mhm.
I agree with, unless you have people who are very flexible in how they approach the pacing with that.
I
Yeah.
haven't tried Malazan. I've been intimidated by it. People have told me like,
Oh, no.
don't worry, whatever. But I will say it was nice to hear people saying you don't need to do it as a read along. You don't need to do it as a buddy. Like, just read it slow, read it at your own pace, enjoy it. And I think that I'd get the most enjoyment, most value doing it that way. It just would break my heart to not be part of the community and share my thoughts and do all this stuff. But maybe just reading it slow and still doing that might work. I don't know.
Yeah,
know.
that's what Tori's doing. Tori's still not finished with the series, and I know she's been trying to go at a pace that feels right for her. And I think
Yeah.
that's smart.
I read Gardens of the Moon back in February, and then I just started Dead House Gates this month, and I'm going to finish it today, actually. So I'm very
Wow.
excited. I've only got like
Okay.
70 pages left.
Here's my fear then, Brian, is because and Joanna, if I take too long with a series like that, I feel like I won't retain as much, I won't remember, or if I spread them out too far, those
Hmm.
moments won't have as much impact as they're supposed to. If I were to dedicate my entire time just slowly reading that and nothing else, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I read Gardens of the Moon purely because I do a community poll, and the community voted in Gardens of the Moon right while I was in between books 2 and 3 of Sun Eater. And so what I did was I read Gardens of the Moon, then I put down Malazan and did a book a month of Sun Eater up until
Mm,
last month when I finished, or at least got to current to where the author's at now. So now I just picked up Dead House Gates. The thing about it though, Theo, is that you have so many booktube friends that
mhm.
are so intimately familiar with
That's true.
Malazan
That's
that
true.
even if you take time off, you call Joanna, you
Yeah.
message Philip, you do whatever, hey, or Jimmy, any of these guys,
Yeah.
say, hey, you know what? It's literally been 7 months since
I'm
I
ready to
picked
jump
up
back in. Help me out
Malazan.
here. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
remind me what I need to remember,
Yeah.
and
And yeah, yeah.
they do.
And
They
Rogue is
will.
always one that calms me down. He's like, dude, just take your time with it. You'll enjoy it. Don't be so intimidated. So I'll read it at some point. I'm
I
excited
Well,
to.
I
what I'll quickly say is I finished the series at the end of 2021. And
Mm,
actually, that was my first year on BookTube. And I took a big risk with my channel at that time. And I just decided to devote my main priority series to being Malazan. And I didn't
mm,
really pick up a lot of the books at the time. I suffered a lot of FOMO. And for me, that was the right choice. I'm not saying that's
mhm,
the right choice for anybody else, but for me, just riding that Malazan wave was the way to go. I read the last 3 books back to back. I only read 1 book that in the month of December that year, and it was The Crippled God because I'm a super slow reader, and those books have a lot to absorb. But for me, it was worth that journey. But what I'll say is, yeah, I've probably forgotten a lot of details since then. I mean, that was 2021, so now we're talking 3 years
Mhm.
ago at this point. However, I still remember how the books made me feel, and when I watch a video, like I was watching Nerdy Kathy's Dead House Gates video recently, brilliant, brilliant video. Highly recommend. Probably my favorite Dead House Gates video I've ever seen. And watching her reactions and her talk through her experience of that book brought it all back. And it's been several years since I've read Dead House Gates at this point.
Sure.
mhm.
So it's a very memorable series. It was
You know,
memorable enough for me anyway.
I sort of have the same feeling with A Song of Ice and Fire because it's been a while since I finished Feast now. I'm going to go into Dance, but I'm going to get a bit of a recap, but I remember, and again, I may have forgotten some moments from Clash and from Game of Thrones and stuff, but I remember the key things and I remember the story as a cohesive sort of narrative. And I remember how I was feeling at the time in reading different things. And I remember how I feel about certain characters and it's just done so well that doesn't really matter as much. And I feel like there's so much into Malazan where it's a bit of the same effect. You don't need to carry every detail forward. It's really just a
Oh, no, no,
compounding
no,
effect, right?
no.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you
No, of
can't
course, of
carry
course.
every
And that
detail
makes me feel
forward.
better. It's okay if you
Yeah.
don't. So that's great. Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
I told a lot of people, when I started seeing people picking up Malazan, and I think I even told this to Jimmy when I saw him getting into it, and I hardly knew him at the time.
Yeah.
I remember saying, "Don't feel pressured to talk about everything that's in the book, because there's no way you can do it." Like, if you're doing a video on Malazan, for
Mhm.
example, just don't feel pressured. Even AP and Philip didn't talk about everything that happened in those books. Just try to talk about or reflect on the things that meant something to you, that spoke to you. So that would be my biggest recommendation when it comes to Malazan. And there
Hmm.
is no
Hmm.
pressure. There is no, it took, like here we have Jared saying it. It took him
Hmm.
6 years to read Malazan the first time, and it works no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sweet.
I'll just interject that when Theo mentioned that, it's been a little intimidating to think about getting into Malaz, and I've heard that from countless people say that Lazen, they want to do it, they want to participate, but it seems so intimidating. I would just remind everybody it's just a book. I
Yeah.
promise you that, Theo, the forms that you've learned for jujitsu and the constant practicing and memorization of all of that, not to mention all the other things you've done in your life, far more complicated
You, look,
than a book.
I made a video about all the intimidating series that I was afraid to try for length,
Yeah.
for complexity, for prose, for
Yeah.
whatever. A Song of Ice and Fire was on that list. It's become probably my favorite series.
Yeah.
I was also terrified of, the
Yeah.
length and density and whatever, maybe not density, but, complexity
Yeah.
and world building and all this stuff and the commitment, right? How big these are. I'm
Right.
loving it. So,
Yeah.
sometimes you just got to jump in.
Just
you
a
know?
book.
It's just a book.
I
Brian,
say
it's
that
just a
about
book.
it's just a book. I just say that about Book of the New Sun all the time because people always tell me, "Oh, Gene Wolfe seems so
That's one.
intimidating, and
Yep.
I'm not smart enough to read it, and I'm unreliable narrator, and I won't know what's going on." I'm like, "It's just a book. So what? So if you pick
And
up
look, here's the
30% of
thing.
it, great."
I'm at my core, I would say I'm kind of a nerd.
Yeah.
I work and have studied in finance for a number of years. And I want to get things right. I want to understand things in the right
Mhm.
way. It's just how
Mhm.
my brain works
Sure.
sometimes.
Yeah.
I operate in the gray area too, but sometimes I like to be black and white. I'm like, what does this mean? How am I
Mhm.
supposed to enjoy this? What is this supposed to do for me? And some books I'm worried that I'm not going to get it in the right way,
Yeah.
which is a
Well,
silly thing to think.
I
But
think it's almost like, seeing an artistic movie that is a
yes,
little bit different, than a
yeah.
normal Hollywood blockbuster where it's just doesn't necessarily follow a particular format. And the goal is to sort of give you a feeling, maybe more so than a beginning, middle, and end. And I think some of these more what we consider to be or what gets talked about as intimidating books fall into those because they're intimidating because we can't really predict them like we can with everything else, even like in terms of format. Then you get into
Mhm.
some brilliant authors like Gene Wolfe, whose vocabulary is very vast. Same with Jenny Wirtz, where that becomes an issue too. Going, my gosh, will I even understand half the words? Yeah, you will. And if you don't, we have dictionaries. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Good
I
point.
wanted to ask, related to this question, because Books with Genghis Khan put here that it was a nice binging Malazan for
Oh
Mm,
most
my
for
God.
BookTube and not worrying about that for half a year. I think I was of some benefit too that I started this series before I started a channel, because I do think that we all same with Book of the New Sun, which I feel a little bit because I haven't read it yet. So
Hmm.
there is part of me that's like, "Oh, no, am I gonna get it?" That kind of concern a little bit. But I do wonder about having a channel and how that influences you too. And specifically with you, Theo, having taken a break, like how that's changed for you. But before we get into your answer, let me start with Brian first and just get your answer, Brian, about
mhm.
how you feel having a channel has changed your your TBR or your whole
Sure.
approach to reading.
Yeah, the community on my channel is really active in our community tab, and we do a poll where they select a book for me every month. So that's a direct influence on my TBR. They're just picking it for me. Also, within the comments on whatever video I happen to be talking about, I get a billion recs in the comments. So my it really used to be prior to starting my channel, I'd get all my recommendations from other booktubers. And
Mhm.
because, I don't want to waste tons of time reading lousy books. And if I happen to align with Mike on certain things and Jimmy on certain things, and I know, and Joanna on certain things and Philip, I know that I'm going to be in for a good experience. But what I have found since, your question is specifically from starting the channel, the comments section is full of books that nobody on BookTube talks about at all. And some of them are so intriguing and have been just fabulous books for me. So that's been a positive. On the negative side, I would say sort of like what you talked about. It's and what I think Ben may have talked about it too, that reading these big series where I tend to binge. Like I read all of Wheel of Time in 3 months. It would be really
Wow.
difficult for me to do that having the channel, because then the whole channel would be Wheel of Time for 3 months. And that's great for wheelies, but for everybody else, I think they'd, tap out. So I think my general sensibility of wanting to binge through a series has been forced to be mellowed out, because I have to have a little bit different genres going on, just to kind of keep it interesting for everybody. That's
Oh,
that's my answer. Theo's probably
yeah.
got a better one, because he's had both sides of the equation more recently.
Yeah.
No, I
Before getting
actually, yeah.
Sorry, I
Go
just
ahead,
wanted to
Johnny.
ask one follow-up question to Brian about that. So you said different genres. Do you mean specifically subgenres in fantasy, or do you feel like genres in general are
Um,
welcome on
Mm,
your channel?
both. I
hmm.
mean, I read a lot of sci-fi. I read tons of lit RPG, which is really a subgenre of both of those, because there's sci-fi lit RPG, there's fantasy lit RPG. I've been reading a little bit more historical fiction with the Guy Gavriel Kay stuff, which I am notoriously stingy about giving 5 stars to anything unless it really moves me. And the only 2 GGK books I've read both got 5 stars. So, yeah, it's just both genre and the subgenres within those genres.
Okay, cool. Yes, great answer. Okay, Theo, what did you want to how do you want to
I
answer that?
This one's difficult because I'm almost on the other side of the coin from Brian, where I don't love to binge series. I like to take my time a little bit, and I find that, and I have a notorious problem of picking up a book one in a series and moving on to another and saying, I love that. I'm absolutely going to continue, but let me see this shiny thing over here. Where my subscribers would probably rather me finish stuff up and have a cohesive thought about a trilogy or about a series sooner than I'm scheduled to complete them. Similarly, I bounce around different genres, different subgenres, whatever. I just finished a book that I loved about this old lady who befriends an octopus. And like, I don't know if my subscribers want me to talk about that. It's not Malazan. It's not, Sanderson. It's not whatever. So it's interesting because like Brian, I get a lot of recommendations from BookTube, and it has guided me. Like I think I've been giving out. I'm getting a little more stingy with my 5 stars, guys, but I've been pretty generous and I've been pretty lucky in choosing things that align with my tastes so well. And most of that is coming from people that understand my tastes and give thoughtful recommendations and all that stuff. But I you know, I just bounce around a lot, and I just never know who's going to want to see what or who's going to want me to talk about what. And so I found myself thinking too much about that and not adhering to my mood reading tendency as much. So I just found when I took a step away from BookTube, I just kind of was reading what I wanted to read and not really focusing on how that's going to impact content, how, that's going to impact anything. And so, like I said, I value the recommendations that I got from BookTube, but I found I was putting perhaps too much weight on what that content will look like and maybe reading those books and not giving into the other things that I might want to pick up as well. So like in the case of this book, I saw it on a bookstore, on the shelf at the bookstore, picked it up, looked on Goodreads, saw a couple friends were marking it to read or reading or whatever, and decided just to try it. And, it was a great book. I loved it. So pros and cons, gives you a little bit of stress, gives you a beautiful community to join and talk to. You get wonderful recommendations, but then you also get flooded with books that you have severe FOMO about. So pros and cons,
I love that, and I love,
I
by
just
the way, the
rambled. I'm sorry.
remarkably
No,
no,
I
no,
like
you
that
did
answer too, because
yeah.
I think I
You know what I
think
mean, right?
I for sure get it, because I think
Yeah.
when people start BookTube, they do it because they want to talk about the books they love, and then they
Yes.
realize they have a channel. And I've been lucky that the channel's taken off relatively quickly for as
Oh
short a
yeah.
period as I've been on here. And then it kind of becomes, well, this isn't just about me anymore. This is about the people that are tuning in and spending their time. Because let's face it, I mean, I guarantee you both of your YouTube feeds are full of BookTube, like with all
Yeah,
your friends on BookTube, right? And
totally.
even us as BookTubers don't have time to watch all of our friends' videos. And if I put myself in the shoes of just a regular subscriber who doesn't have a channel, they probably even have more channels that they're subscribed to than I do. So I feel like in some regard, I almost owe it to them a little bit if they're going to choose to invest their
It's
time
true. It's true.
and pick my channel versus any other 15-minute video to watch. I want to give them something for them too. So it's hard because then I can see where if you take a break like you did, you start reading more what you may personally have interest in
Yeah.
than what you
Yeah.
think you feel like that would be either good
Now,
for
most
channel
of the time,
growth
most of
or
the time it
whatever.
aligns, right? Like,
That's
most of
good.
the time it
Yeah.
aligns for sure. But it's also important to know that as soon as you click record on this side and start editing videos, right? Come up with a channel name, you will have way less time to read than you ever thought.
Oh
you would
my
have.
God,
Like
yes.
so I think people are sensitive to that. They definitely know how much time this side takes.
Mhm.
But I don't think people really understand until they try it. It really takes a lot more time, and you find you are desperately wanting to read more than you ever wanted to before because you want
Mhm.
to talk about it and have the community and serve these recommendations that people are so thoughtful about. But then you have so much less time to do it.
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword. It's crazy.
That's a
It
completely
is.
awesome point because
You
you're
know?
right. This makes you do want to read more and it constricts your actual available reading
Yeah,
time
totally. Yeah.
for sure. Awesome
Sure.
point. I haven't even heard that before, but that's awesome.
Yeah.
It does. It takes up a lot of time because not only are you taking time to prepare videos, do the reading, prepare the video, record the video, edit, upload, but you're also responding to comments and engaging with others.
Absolutely.
Or if you have a
Absolutely. Which
Discord,
I
you're
think is
engaging
super
with
important because
Discord.
to build a
Yeah.
community like you guys have, and Brian, your channel has blown up impressively. It's
Mhm.
because of your engagement, both of you. It's because of
Thanks.
people can actually speak, and they know that if they recommend something, they'll be able to discuss it with you and all that stuff. So it's not just about that front side; it's the whole back end, like you said.
Mhm.
That is a lot, and it's years down the road. People will respond to a comment or comment on a video from 2 years ago.
That's
You'd be
awesome.
surprised how many times, maybe not surprised, how many times people will go on an old video and say, "Hey, have you read this yet?" Or "What did you think? I just saw that, you read it 6 months ago, but have you finished the series or whatever?" So people are really following your journey. And Brian, like you said, they're invested. And so there's some value you need to add back to the community too.
But
And
I would
it takes
add to
time.
that. I would add to that by saying that I think that it actually complements this journey of being true to your viewers when you're true to
Mm.
yourself as a reader and reading what you
Yes.
want to read. And I think what's
Yeah.
beautiful is, as you talked about Remarkably Bright Creatures, is that the name of the book?
Yeah.
As you
Yeah,
picked
it
it, as
is.
you picked it up, you immediately found a BookTube friend. You found Madison to read it with you.
Yeah. Super funny.
You're
I
so
sent her a picture. I'm
excited.
like, LOL, just picked this book up completely out of my comfort zone. Not sure why I bought it. And she's like, "Here's my picture. I just bought it too. Let's read it." So we did. And it was we both gave it 5 stars. Loved it. Right. Very
Yes.
moving.
I think that's so
So
important to me
yeah.
personally. Like, I think it is something to be very, very mindful of. Like Brian
Mhm.
said about being mindful of the fact that people are taking the time to watch your videos,
Yep.
and you want to do your due diligence when it comes to that. But at the same time, I think it's important to read what's true. Be true to yourself with what you
Mhm.
want to read,
Yes.
not just read because these are the hype series and people want to
Mhm.
know my
Well,
thoughts on the hype
that's a good
series.
point because I feel like viewers are, they're smart and they're people as well, and they can sense that authenticity and they want to
Oh, yeah.
follow you because they want to follow you and what you like. And so as soon as you start to pander to one demographic or whatever, or start to get a little bit, yeah, right, catering to one specific author or taste or whatever, they're going to sense it. And that's not why they're there. They're there to get a sense of your true tastes and opinions and all that. And that's why actually, this is a really good question. How about this? To what extent do you guys try and balance sentiment on your channel in terms of your reviews and things? Do you give negative reviews? Do you stick with the positives? Do you not review the ones that you don't like as much? I find it's a bit of a difficult balance to strike. I don't have a lot of negative reviews on my channel. I feel like maybe that drives a lot of engagement, which I might be missing out on. If I were to review every book I read, I might have more of a balance, but do I have the passion to discuss a book I didn't enjoy as much? Do I have enough to talk about in that kind of review? I try and stay away from that. And I've been lucky because of my viewers, because of recommendations. I've been picking up books for the last couple years that I really enjoy. So those low ratings and books I don't enjoy are few and far between. But you guys are much more well-read. You guys probably read much more balanced diet of books, for example. So how do you balance those conflicting opinions? And do you balance it on the channel? What do you do? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a
I'll
tough
let
one.
Brian answer first, and then I'll answer next.
Sure. So I have exactly 0 book reviews on my channel. None.
Really?
And I might be the only booktuber that doesn't have
I
a
have a
single book
few,
review.
not a lot. Yeah.
When I decided to do this, I wanted to lean into my strengths and kind of let others make content that are their strengths. And when I
Yeah.
watch somebody like Joanna or Philip Chase or somebody who's really good at analyzing story, John
know.
Minton falls in that category too.
Yeah.
It's like, why do I want to make a video outside of what my talent levels are? Sure, I can talk about a book, and I do on my monthly recap. So if I read anywhere from 5 to 9 books a month, I'll discuss each one of them during a monthly recap. A 10,000 overhead, viewpoint kind of summary of my thoughts, but nothing too deep. Sometimes when I do top 10 lists, I will talk about where, obviously something is on the list and why it's on the list. And those are generally highlights because I don't do a whole lot of like top 10 things I can't stand. So those are usually positives. So I think in regards to books that I don't like, they get a couple of sentences in my monthly recap. I basically explain what it's about. I say, if you like this kind of thing, this book might be for you. If you don't like this kind of thing, it may not be for you. And then I basically just move on.
Leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah. Reviews aren't what I'm good at. God forbid Philip starts putting on blonde mullet wigs and coming up with 80s, synth pop icon characters. Then I'm going to be in real trouble because then that guy can just do everything.
They can't take that away from you. They can't take that away from you.
That's
you got
right.
that X factor. That's different. Honestly, I don't have a lot of reviews either. And I struggle with them because depending on the day, there are different things I want to say about that book. And so to condense it into particularly a video review, it's difficult. And then I'll see Joanna or Philip or Jimmy or whoever, or even, Alex, Tall Guy Reads, who does really thoughtful, really articulate reviews. These people have done reviews on the book that are 10 times better than anything I could come up with. So why would I even bother? Right. So I struggle with that as well. And then I've heard people say, well, no, we want everyone's opinion for what it is, right? It doesn't all, so subjective, like someone's review being subjectively good will not mean the same thing to someone else, right? So they want everyone's opinion. So sometimes I struggle with that. I see someone having put out a review on a book I'm thinking about reviewing, and I'm like, I don't think I'll be able to do that. So
But you did a really good review. You did a good review on Legend, if I recall.
I've done a couple. I loved Legend. Yeah, I tried the odd one for sure.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
To clarify what I was saying, just for people that are watching, if you're somebody that's thinking about starting a channel, or maybe you've just started taking a channel, please don't take my not doing book reviews, because I think there's other people that it's their strength as a reason for you to not do them. If you want to do book reviews, you should absolutely do book reviews. And if you're not great at them yet, you'll get better each time you do them. So,
that is true. It is a skill that can be developed. That is true.
Absolutely. I mean, Philip and AP's, like 7-part series on analyzing story that they bopped back and forth on each other's channels in the last few months. That's like an amazing free course on YouTube on how to analyze stories and how to do great book reviews. So I would say if somebody wants to do book reviews, absolutely, it's a learned skill. Don't nope out of it because there's other people better right now. You may wind up to be the best in the world at it if you are really into doing book reviews. It's not my bag. It doesn't excite me to turn the camera on too much, just to analyze a book. We all like different things about being on this side of the camera, and that's just not on the top, 10 for me.
Yeah, for me, I do enjoy doing book reviews now and then. It really depends. I'm thinking about doing one. I'm not totally sure if I will. I'm thinking about doing one for Clara and the Sun, but even if I don't do a single book review, a lot of what I've been doing this year is combining my reviews into a single video. And sometimes that's under the form of a wrap up, but I do try to go a little bit more in depth rather than just, I like the book. I didn't like the book. This worked, I do try to go more in depth, but I'm like you, and I'm going to refer to your video on gradings on 5-star
Mm.
ratings and why you're not doing a lot of 1-star ratings because you DNF the books. I don't DNF books very often, and if I do, it's usually because it's an audiobook and I can't really get into the story, like I'm not it's not holding my attention,
Mhm.
or I'm struggling with the audiobook narrator. Usually that's a reason for me to DNF a book, but otherwise I usually don't DNF books. In fact, I don't remember the last time I DNF'd a physical book. Um, yeah, or a visual reading experience. But
Mhm.
there have been a couple of books that have slipped through that I've read that I was not super crazy about, and I do try to be upfront on my channel about, books that I I didn't care about, and I did do a review. I'll go ahead and give an example. I did a review earlier this year on The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez, and
Mm.
hear me out with this book. This book was this is why I don't rate books, because if I were to rate the book based on my enjoyment level, like how I
Yeah.
felt in the reading
Hmm.
experience, it would be like a 2 to 3-star book for me.
Hmm.
Maybe 2.5, maybe I'd round it up to 3, but because some parts were interesting, but a lot of times I didn't feel very comfortable in the read. I just didn't feel like I was the right audience. But if I were to rate the book objectively on, and I know people are gonna argue that there's no such thing as objective, but,
Yeah.
you know, for the
Well,
I
for
think
this
there is.
argument,
I think there can be. Yeah.
as far as, like, what the book did and the innovation that went into it and the purpose behind every single unique aspect of the book, I would give it 5 stars hands down. I
Yeah.
think it's a brilliant book.
Yeah.
Even the second person narration, which I've just decided, like, in most cases, I do not like second person narration. I love choose your own adventure stories when I was a kid.
Sure.
That's
Yeah.
an
Me too.
exception. But I didn't really like it in that book. I didn't feel like I connected with it, but I still think the prose was excellent, and I did go into depth in my review about that, like what I thought the book did that was strong, and I tried to break it down, and then I think one fault I had with that review is I waited till towards the end to talk about my
mm,
discomfort with the story, whereas maybe I could have started up front saying, "I didn't really like my experience of this book," and then gone into the positives. But
Sure.
I'm being honest about the positives. I'm not I really do feel like this book deserves the praise it's been getting, and I'm all for books like that being written. I just didn't
mm.
feel like I was the right audience for it, and I felt
And
yeah. So anyway, there are books like that that I feel like I do read them, and I try to take a step back. My approach to reviews is I get into the book, and then I try to take a step back and try to understand what the book is doing and the audience it's trying to.
I tried to do that too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why I didn't give A Court of Thorns and Roses the the rating that maybe like
yeah.
I was watching Brian's video on I think it was the most disappointing or whatever, and Akatar was definitely on there. And that's a situation where I was looking at the what I perceive to be the quality, and that would really be not, let's say, great according to what I would perceive to be that criteria. But then I didn't hate it, and I'm kind of curious about what the second book has in store. And I understand, again, same like you, I try and step back and say, okay, did it accomplish what it tried to accomplish, and were there some shortcomings? Sure. But my enjoyment was a 3, 4. Like I was into it and I
Mhm.
consumed it very quickly. Objectively, the quality was the detractor on my rating. So it's very interesting how that can be different depending on your view. So
Mhm.
I think also, like, when you were talking about Spear Cuts Through Water, the book that for me is probably most similar is Cloud Atlas, because
I want to try that one.
my personal enjoyment of Cloud Atlas was maybe a 3.75, but objectively speaking, it's probably a 5-star book. It's probably been my toughest one if I'm thinking
Mm,
about what I'm rating this year. That's been my hardest one to do. And Joanna, I'll give you almost like a musical example because you'll appreciate this, understanding music. There, if you go listen to a classical pianist or any type of an orchestral piece, it may not be your favorite, but there's no denying that some of the ability, both in the composition of the work and the performance of the work, is expert tier composing, expert tier performing. It just might not
mhm.
be your personal favorite. And I think in some regard, that's a little bit what we're talking about here with
Yeah.
some of those kinds of books where we can recognize the insane difficulty level, challenge level for both composer and performer. But it's still not our favorite, top
So
50, top 100 pieces.
I saw someone
Yeah.
in the comments, DNF Blood Meridian. I think it was Rick. So
Yeah.
Blood Meridian is the only review on my GOODREADS where I didn't give it a rating because I didn't know how to. I
Yeah.
can look at it and say this person is a genius. The prose or the way, the style, the content, the story, the way that it was all done was, I would argue, expert. But did I enjoy it? I don't know. It was an experience, and it was a unique experience, and that says something about the book too. I just don't really know, and other people may look at it differently, and I can point to it and say, I think these things were done very creatively, very expertly, and very much top tier if you were to compare, whatever. But I don't know if I enjoyed it. I don't know where I land with a rating. Like that's a different lens, So yeah, was it for me? Like I don't know. That was a difficult one.
Yeah, it's a difficult book
Yeah.
for sure.
And I
Yeah,
think some of these really expert level ones that don't always resonate with us can change over time too. Like, so I bet
Probably.
you if you picked up Blood Meridian in 15 years, it may hit you different, might not. But I think some of these really S tier level works in terms of, objectively, they're really different and good. They're the
Yeah.
ones that are most likely, I think, to change probably for the positive if we're kind of a mixed bag on them right now.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah.
as we get through more life experiences.
Yeah,
I
that's
agree. I was
probably
actually
true.
watching a really good video yesterday on the channel The Active Mind. He's someone who reads a lot of literary fiction and especially Russian literature. And he did a video on the top 5 books he wants to reread. And what was neat about that is that every book he talked about that he wanted to reread, it was for a different reason. And so, for example, he had Dostoevsky's The Demons book, and he wants to reread it because he knows more about Russia now. He knows more about the language. He has a lot more context going into a reread to appreciate it more, even though he enjoyed it the first time. He also put Blood Meridian in that list because he didn't really like it the first time. He didn't think the characters spoke to him at all. And he feels like, there's so much conversation about the book that he wants to maybe try again and see if it's different. So I don't know. I think there's something to that like we can go into a book the second time. There can always be room to experience something in a new way for some of those more like complex books.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
cool. And by the way, I also wanted to bring up, so Brian, you had a wonderful video on your channel yesterday on Motley Crue's. And I
Oh,
have to
yeah.
say, I was excited because you put the Motley Crue band in the, in the video. And I'm like, I think I'm like one of the few people who knows who Motley Crue is, the band.
On BookTube,
Yeah, on BookTube
possibly.
anyway.
Yeah. Well, Mike for sure. Yeah, he's my fellow heavy metal rocker guy with you. So yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. That was a great video concept though, and I really loved your answers for that. Is that something that when you came up with that video concept, was that just something that came to you like, "Oh, wow, I've read a lot of books with really interesting array of characters in my stories."
Yeah, I think it was after I read that book called Outlaw, which I talked about as just a novel of the Robin Hood legend. And a lot of the times, whenever I have an idea for a video, I will just throw it in a Gmail draft to myself. And I've got like a long list of video concepts. And whenever I'm struggling for an idea to come up with for a video, I will go to that Gmail and go, because honestly, if I don't write it down, it'll be just out of sight, out of mind forever. And I was like, you know what? I thought about doing this Motley Crue type of a video. Let's give it a shot and see if anybody is interested in it. But yeah, thank you for watching it. I'm glad that you liked it. It was fun to make. I think that there's far more, obviously, books that have tremendous motley crews in them than
Mhm.
I covered. But one of the things that I like to do on my channel is to keep the time of the videos, if I can, under 20 minutes, unless like it's a long monthly recap where I'm, kind of summarizing everything I read and all the videos that I made for the month. Just because, again, we get into that. What are we asking of our,
Hmm.
subscribers to
Hmm.
really watch? And I would much rather have them watch a 15 to 20-minute video than scrub through a 40-minute video and watch
Totally. Oh yeah.
pieces of it. It's less work for me. It's less work for them. I think they like it better too.
Hmm.
And I do the live stream for the long form content, but yeah, thank you. I'm glad that you like
Well,
that
Yeah.
one that you
idea.
mentioned, Brian, one that you mentioned is Kings of the Wild, and
Yeah.
I've been wanting to get to it forever.
Oh, it's
So
great.
I might. Have you read the sequel?
Yeah.
I don't remember if you mentioned it. Okay.
Yeah, I
Is it
did. I
good? Is
read,
it Bloody Rose?
yeah, it's Bloody
Yeah.
Rose. So basically, Kings of the Wild is sort of this homage to 70s classic rock.
Yeah.
And even like the name of their group that they walk around is called Saga, like SAGA,
Right.
which if you think about a 70s progressive rock band, it could
Totally.
easily be called Saga.
Mhm.
Totally.
The Bloody Rose is more of the homage to 80s rock, and it
Oh,
involves the daughter of one of the characters from book one. So you still get some book one characters,
cool.
but it has moved on to a bit of a different cast. But yeah, Kings of the Wild, the more you know classic rock, the more Easter eggs you're going to find
Cool.
in there. But you don't need to even read any of them. Gosh, what's the lead singer? David. Oh yeah. So like the town they're from is Coverdale, basically from
Mhm.
David Coverdale's Whitesnake. So
Right.
I mean, it's cool.
So it has a lot of
Interesting.
references to
It has
old rock.
the more familiar you are with 70s classic rock, you, you're gonna find them. But yeah.
Ah, okay, cool. That's cool to know.
But again, you
Yeah.
don't. But you don't have to. I mean, it's still a killer adventure story of these washed up, you know, adventuring party that put the band back together for one last hurrah to do one big final mission, and it's
One
exactly what
last
you would.
show, right?
It's
It's
such
Yeah.
a
one last
clever
show.
concept.
If
Reunion.
if you've seen the movie The Blues Brothers, it reminds me of that, where you've got the two guys
Cool.
that are going to go collect all the other members of the band one by one to create basically we're on a mission from God. We're making our one-time comeback. And it's all the trials and tribulations they go through first just to get the band back together in the first place and then to go up against, the big bad. So it's
Yeah.
Yeah,
great. Big fan
that
of it.
sounds fun.
Thank you.
That sounds really fun. We got a question here in the comment section. Any advice from the three of you on getting started on BookTube? I'm coming up upon 200 subscribers after a few videos.
Sweet. Congrats.
Congratulations. That's
Hmm.
really awesome. And want to maintain momentum. So,
Hmm.
any advice that you two have?
I
And
mean,
maybe
you're
anyone
probably
in
the
the
one to give
comment section
advice,
too.
but
Yeah, you guys have been at it longer than me. You guys go first if you like.
okay. How about this? I'll jump in and just say, um, I would just take your time and have a pace that works for you. It's very tempting to want to blast your channel with a bunch of stuff that's been pent up inside of you and books you want to talk about and series you want to start and all this stuff, and it can get overwhelming and it can derail you pretty quickly. So just have a good pace, slow. You'll start to maybe even, I would even go so far as to say, build up a bit of a library of some videos and just trickle them out and give yourself time to record and think and be part of the community. One little thing that I would say, and we touched on it, just make yourself available, I think, to comments, to the community, to whatever, and really focus on driving engagement with the video and building the community and talking to people who care about your videos instead of just putting out the next video. I think there's more value in the former. So that's my
Yeah.
little piece. But
Yeah. I think that's really good advice.
yeah,
I mean, I guess I really think the community engagement to me, speaking as a viewer, because I was a
yeah,
BookTube viewer for many years as well, and I still am.
hmm, yeah,
it means a lot to me whenever people heart my comments. I know some booktubers don't heart comments, and I don't get it.
I
Like,
find that
mine from
bizarre.
Mike's book reviews, I'll be honest, like, it makes me less inclined to comment on a video if I don't get a heart.
I agree with you. I feel the same way. Granted, at that level, it's a little bit difficult to keep up. But I will say, yeah, especially on a smaller channel, if I'm trying to build up this channel and discuss something in the video, whatever, and I don't get any reply back, I find like, oh, like, what was the point of putting out that video then, right? Like, don't you want people to watch and articulate with you? And I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
So
I
Go
my
ahead.
my thoughts on this are, I'm going to go to the practical here and just say you need to understand that if and I'm going to read the comment as I think it's intended. I'm coming up on 200 subscribers, so you care about subscribers, which is fine. It's good. Some care, some don't. I do. Others don't. Doesn't matter. John Minton could care less. I
Hmm.
absolutely care about subscribers. After, I mean, he wants them
I was
obviously, but
gonna say, okay, but what about that tingle he's always
well,
talking about?
you cannot escape John Minton's tingle. I mean, that is unavoidable, inescapable. But he never looks at it. I mean, Jacob is really the person that looks at subscriber count. It's just not. It's just not a metric for him. It's not a driver. It is for me, just because I'm an entrepreneurial kind of person, and I want, if I'm going to put my time into something, I'd like to have it be successful.
mhm.
So my advice here is this: understand that YouTube is an algorithm based business, and you can put out a video that you think is just the best, most fire video you've ever done in your life, and it gets no views. And you can't take that too much to heart. You can also put a video together that you thought you basically phoned it in, and it just crushes.
It's
And
funny how that happens, Brian.
yeah, and yeah,
Sometimes you're like, what? This one?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Like,
what
yeah,
happened last week.
yeah.
This is living proof. Yeah, John says the tingle will come for you. Um, the that happened to me last week, because last week I did a video on hidden gems, fantasy series that are lesser known. I
hmm
just threw it out there because I thought it might be useful to some people. It, I don't know, I had a few thousand views in like 3 days. It's crazy.
Wow.
Then
Yeah.
yesterday's video, I spent tons of time on, obviously editing and doing all this stuff. It's not done well at all in terms of performance against my other videos. So
Okay.
understanding that you are basically part of an algorithm business where your control ends the minute you hit upload, apart from, as Theo and Joanna have said, engaging back in community comments. That is within your control as well. But once you hit that upload button, for all intents and purposes, it's really out of your hands. And Mike gave me some great advice when I got started, is to just realize that this is a very peaks and valleys type of an experience, where it's so easy to get on the highs of the highs and the lowest of the lows. And to just remember that sometimes this stuff is totally outside of your control. Have fun doing this, because that's why you probably started it in the first place. Remember why you started it in the first place, because it's super easy to get distracted in the weeds of the numbers.
Yeah.
How many new views did this video get? How many new subscribers did I pick up this week? It's really easy, especially if you're somebody like me that's a little bit business motivated and want to see things grow. Understand that some of this stuff is just flat out of your control. It's like when I owned the
Yeah.
bar, I couldn't, you know what? I own a bar in Minneapolis, right? There's a better than 50-50 chance it's going to snow like crazy in the middle of January on a Saturday night. It doesn't matter how much planning I did. Weather's out of your control,
Yeah.
algorithms out of your control. Just have fun with it and look at it as a long, process, rather than an
Yeah.
individual video performance week to week, or you're going to be questioning everything you do. Like,
That's a good
you
point,
know,
Brian. Have fun, especially at the beginning. Like, just if you're
yeah,
not having fun,
Oh,
something's
that's
wrong. Like, just
that's
just
the
just have
best
fun. Yeah.
time. I think, like, when you're starting a channel, it's the best time to just have
Mhm.
fun with what you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
harder as you go on, and then you're like, "Oh, wow, people are watching me now," you know?
Uh-oh. Yeah.
Uh,
What
wow,
did I do? Yeah.
so I think so in that we actually think fast growth is not always the most ideal thing, depending on the person and the channel, of course.
Hmm.
But I do think, like, yeah, just have fun. And I love what you said, Brian. I think everything you said is just such a home run because so
Totally.
many of us can relate to posting a video thinking, oh, this is going to do so well. And it just doesn't do that
Hmm.
well. I feel like a lot of us can relate to that situation. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would also say, like, the algorithm game thing. So a couple things about that. One, thumbnails and titles matter. I'm not saying I'm the best at it at all, but they do go a long way. They go a long way. So if you're talking about a book
Yeah.
that people haven't, that some obscure book that a lot of people aren't into right now, doing something like hidden gem or why is nobody
Yes.
talking about this? Doing
Hmm.
something like
Yes.
that is kind of a little loud, but I think it'll get more
Yeah.
attention than if you just put like a book review on
It's
this book,
true. Don't let
you
it
know?
consume you. Don't think too long about that stuff, but definitely give it a little bit of thought in advance of, would you click on that video? Right? Is the video going to answer a question that maybe your viewer might have about that? Like, what is the hook? Give it a little bit of thought, but don't let it paralyze you in not putting out something or not, just get stuff out there. I think is
Oh,
the number
yes,
one thing, and give a little
I
bit of
agree.
attention with the quality too, and how you want to direct traffic and why someone would click on this video. Of course.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
well
I
said.
I'll
Mhm.
I'll also add in one thing that I've started doing. I mean, it probably took me about 3 months of doing BookTube to really realize this, but have in mind the title of your video, exactly what you're going to call it, and what the thumbnail is basically going to look like before you shoot the video, because
Yeah.
it will kind of focus your on camera presence to what you already know you want to do. I think a lot of people wait till their video is done to come up with the title and to come up with a thumbnail. And I just think that for me, the videos that have done better are the ones where I really locked in the concept of exactly what it is before I shoot. Your mileage may vary. Try everything. And again, one thing I'm sorry, John, if I'm going on too long about this question, but it's near and dear to me because I have lived this probably more recently than you guys, of being totally brand new and having the first couple hundred subscribers. Um, don't compare yourself to too many other booktubers. Watch your videos and try to identify one thing that you think you can improve on the next time you shoot a video.
Hmm.
um, that's really the best way that I have found. And a lot of people refuse to do that because they don't like watching their videos. And that's a pretty common thing where you'll find booktubers saying, oh my God, I can't watch any of my old videos. They're just awful at it. I don't look at it that way. I look at it like, all right, there's going to be a lot of stuff in here I don't care for. However, let's find one and let's fix it for the next video that I
Hmm.
shoot. And I think over time, as the months go by, if you fix 10 things you didn't like about an early video, you've just really significantly improved your own channel without having to study other booktubers, without having to figure out what they're doing, because they're all different. They've read different stuff. They've got different gear. They have different talents in editing. They have different amount of time than you do to make a video. So
Yes. To
work
read
on
even. Yeah.
right. So work on
Totally.
how you can make your own things incrementally, small increments better each time. And I think you'll be blown away when you look back at a video after doing that for about 3 or 4 months and look at all these tiny little changes that you made, and they just
Hmm.
compound and you get better at it.
Yeah.
So much booktube
Great.
wisdom here. Goodness.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
and collab. Make friends with booktubers because they
Yeah.
will. If you are sucking for a period of time, they will lift you up and pull you with them. So I would absolutely get engaged in their discords, watch their live streams like you're doing right now,
Hmm.
participate in the comments, be somebody who legitimately cares about the success of other booktubers. And I think you'll find that there's some really amazing people here in this corner of booktube that will become themselves invested in your success. And it's a really good two-way street.
I
Wow.
will
Talk
just
about
say
a live
before we
one
get
for the road here. Sorry. Go ahead.
before we continue, I just wanted to add one thing to that. And I witnessed myself to the community. Like, I took almost a year off and I came back and it was like I never left, and people were just like, we're so happy you're back. People were commenting, and it was just like one of those things where it was evidence of the community that we have on this side, right, of YouTube, in this little corner, whatever. It's incredible. It's one of the best. It's small, but I think that's a good thing. People
Mhm.
genuinely care about each other, which is cool. So exactly what Brian said, 100%.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I'm sorry, I'm like really behind on the comments now, but just going to scroll forward that he's very grateful, Sci-Fi Finds. And if you all
Good
want
question.
to
Thank you.
support his channel, please go find him and
Yeah.
subscribe to
Let's get him
Sci-Fi
to
Finds.
300 right now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
absolutely. Especially because, this, I don't know so much about Theo's, but I'm guessing it's mostly more fantasy than sci-fi. I don't know.
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's kind of
I like
cool to
sci-fi,
have.
but
Yeah, same here. But just in terms of overall mix of reading, I definitely lean more into fantasy than sci-fi. So this is cool that we got somebody whose
absolutely.
channel is called Sci-Fi Finds that is, into, our fantasy
Yeah.
stuff over here.
Go find some sci-fi, guys. Go find some.
Yeah.
Go find him. And another wonderful booktubers in the chat here,
Thanks, Vera.
hello. And yes, the tingle will come for you. Yes, and I also just want to pay the compliment back to Theo, because I know you complimented us both on being engaging with our communities and stuff. But I think, Theo, the fact that you've returned and the community has welcomed you back with open arms.
Mhm.
Your subscriber count has skyrocketed, I think, a bit more since you came back.
Yeah.
And your
Weird.
engagement has been really high on your videos. Just speaks to how loved you are and how much you've contributed to the community, even before
I
you
appreciate
left.
that.
So
Yeah, and I do want to say it wasn't a deliberate thing. It just, 1 week turned into a month and a month into 2, and I had some stuff happen that directed my attention elsewhere and some family stuff. And so it wasn't I've had it with BookTube, let me take a bit of a break. And I think that was part of the reason why it was a little bit of a more organic return as well, because it just kind of, I just had time at one point to just start again. But yeah, it's been wonderful. So I can't say enough good things about the people. So.
And I think that's
and thank you.
amazing too, because I know it's actually really hard to come back after a break. And I haven't taken a break yet myself. Someday it might happen, but I know from people who've left BookTube and tried to come back, I know that that's been a really hard journey. It feels almost like, from one person told me that it feels a little like entering a conversation that they haven't been part of for a while.
I came back to all these different channels and like Brian's new and he's blown past me, and it's just like, who are these people? And the quality has gone up, the discussion, not gone up, right? But like there's so much happening, and there's so many impressive, John's one of them, so many impressive channels that, I turn on these guys' videos and it's like having a cup of coffee with a friend in the morning. I get to just put something on and like, there's so much value in the content now, and channels that I didn't even know existed. I was like, what is happening? Like, where are my friends? So, and now I have new friends, and it's amazing. So
yeah. Oh, it
does go on without you. It does go on without you. So, yeah.
But I don't know. I think that's really special. It's just been wonderful to have you come back to the community, and just, I love that the community's just been so open, because I think it speaks again to that authenticity, because I've always seen you as somebody who's been an authentic voice. And like we talked about earlier, reading the books that you gravitate towards, rather than just what you feel like you have to read. And I did love the variety in your last wrap up, even though like you said, you didn't really get along with A Court of Thorns and Roses on the level that maybe a super fan would. But you gave it a chance, that you opened your mind.
I did.
You opened your mind to it.
Yeah.
So
Thanks, Joanna. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah. Love the community. Honestly, if something happened in my life where I couldn't make videos for any period of time, I'd still talk to John a couple of times a week for sure. So it's just how things go.
And that was the thing too, when I stepped away a little bit, like I was still lurking in the videos, I wasn't reading as much, so I didn't have a lot of value I perceived to add into the comments or to say anything about a particular book or whatever. But I was lurking, and I was still in a couple Discords and much less active. But I definitely didn't stay away from BookTube. It's definitely where I love to see people thrive, and I love to hear what people have to think or to say, I should say. And so I was still part of it, just from a little more afar. That's all. So
just to answer Vera's question here, was there one specific thing that brought you back, or in front of the camera?
No, it just kind of happened one day. I had a little bit more time, and I had been reading more, and it kind of built up, and I had been watching, organically, and how we all decide to start. you start reading more, you start engaging a little bit more. All of a sudden, you have that itch to hit record. You have something to say, and I felt like I owed it to just say like, oh, by the way, like here's kind of what happened, and I'm reading a lot, and I might be making more videos. And I thought I'd just put out a quick video. And so yeah, not one thing. No, I just saw people like Brian and John and Joanna doing better videos than I could ever make, and I'm like, oh, I should try that, again. So
No,
that's what happened.
it's really good. Let me. I want to ask Theo a question.
Oh no.
So when you were, this is the only question I'm asking because
Okay.
yeah, I'll have you on the show if you're ever interested, and
Anytime.
and I will
Anytime.
prepare lots of questions for you, as Joanna could attest to. But when you were not active making videos, did you find yourself when you tuned into something like this, where you see a few booktubers that you watch? Did you find yourself missing you in that conversation?
Heartbroken.
Yeah.
I was like, these are my people. Like I should be, but it was kind of cool. So I appreciate that. And yeah, definitely. But it's also nice to be able to turn off your brain and go, I'm just going to watch. Like, I'm just going to,
Yeah.
there's no pressure to be part of it. I didn't read the book they're talking about. I have nothing to say. I just want to support from afar and just enjoy it as someone consuming content, like I had been, like Joanna said, for years before even turning on a camera. So it was kind of cool because I was heartbroken. I kind of missed it. I'm like, oh, it'd be so nice to be part of that conversation and to have something to say. But also I just got to enjoy, and that was awesome as well.
Cool.
So yeah.
Cool.
That is cool. I'm just so happy you're back, and I love
Oh, thanks,
all your
guys.
content. I just
Thank
it
you.
just makes me happy. And Brian, I want to ask you too about your videos and your One for the Road. So if any of you have
One for
watched
the road.
Brian's channel, and by the way, if you're not subscribed to these two channels, please subscribe to these two channels. They're both linked in my description below. But Brian, one thing that I think you do that's very special on your channel, you do a lot of really special things on your channel, but it's your One for the Road. And I love this about your channel because you're somebody who has a very extroverted, entrepreneurial personality. You have a big personality. You take up space really well in your videos. You have Rick Thunder show up in your videos. You have fun.
He's hard to control. I mean, you
Yeah.
never know when you're gonna get him. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're very spirited and very excited, very enthusiastic. But then you also have this thoughtful, introspective, one for the road part of your channel. You have this thoughtful side of you, this philosophical side of you that I love. It's such a great juxtaposition to the other elements of your personality, and I just wonder about how that came about.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
good question.
That is super nice and kind of you to say. I'm glad you noticed. I think it came about because before I started the channel, I was really trying to think, all right, if I'm going to do a channel, what do I want to say? What do I want to do? What do I want the viewer to walk away thinking about? And I sort of decided, well, I want to share my experience in books because I've read a lot of them. I want to give people some value. And that's really the primary driver of my channel is if they're going to invest time on my video, I want to give them value. And it could be value about their next great book that they're going to read and they find value there. It could be just entertainment value, which I kind of call booktainment, which they're not going to get on too many other channels because I will sacrifice my own, I don't know. You know what I mean? When Funky Mirage comes out and does disco themes and Rick Thunder comes out doing his thing, I will do what I need to do to put a smile on people's faces. And to me, that's valuable for some people. But the One for the Road specifically for me are really the most important part of what I do on BookTube for me. And it's not everybody's cup of tea, but what I have found is the most consistent messages that I get from people are about your One for the Road really spoke to me today. And that's where I feel like I can really provide the most value. And it, again, I just feel like I throw in a little bit of book knowledge, a little bit of entertainment, and a little bit of Mr. Rogers almost at the end, where I want people to feel good in their own skin. I want people to realize that whatever trials and tribulations they're going through, or the characters in the books they're going through that they can relate to, and that's why they read, that they're not alone in it. And maybe I can come up with some ideas that I have found over many years of successes and failures, and by far more failures than successes, that I think someone can get something from. And I also believe in the power of multiplication in positivity. So if the one for the road makes a difference in somebody's life, and they're nicer to their spouse that day, and their spouse goes off and is nicer to the barista at the Starbucks later that afternoon, and that barista, ends up taking a chance on something in life because they got complimented at work that day. I just think that this fabric unfolds into a much larger thing than what I happen to be saying. And what I'm hoping that I'm doing is being a catalyst for the positivity, for the reflections that people can have to make their lives better. But in doing so, multiply out through all the different contexts people have with others, and down however many multiples that goes out, it absolutely makes a difference in somebody's lives. I think about when I had the nightclub. One day I hired this particular security guard, and about a year and a half later, I hired this particular bartender. And then, like 2 years later, they got married, and now they have a couple of kids. And I know that they
Wow.
wouldn't have ever met if I didn't hire this person one time, and I didn't hire this person another time. Those guys don't meet. Those children don't exist. And we don't know what those children are going to grow up to do. So I
Yeah.
see myself in some regard as a catalyst on those one for the roads of trying to make good things happen for people, which will then spread out to the bigger universe, if that makes
Wow.
sense.
Yes.
Wow.
What a beautiful
What
way
an
to use your
answer.
platform, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a book platform, but you're using it for this extra additional charitable thing in a way, you know? Yeah.
It's just,
You're
it's
too
just,
good. You're too good for this world, Brian.
uh,
We need more Brians.
you
I
know,
know.
thank you guys. I think we need more of you guys. Like I said, I've seen the best in people, and I've seen the worst in people. And I'm being in a nightclub
Mm,
for as long as I was, you're going to get both. And I
totally.
just, and when we see it in others, we can see it in ourselves too. And it really pointed to me some of the things that I love about myself, and maybe some of the things that I don't love as much about myself. So the one for the roads is just as much for me as it is for everybody else too. And that's one thing that I really want to do a better job on, is explaining, look, this isn't just for the viewer here, me coming from this, mountaintop of knowledge. This is for me too. These are reminders for myself that, maybe I'll take them more to heart if I make a video about it and say it out loud. Cause, you
Yeah.
know, we
Yeah.
don't
Good
have very
point.
good, we don't have very good, BS detectors in our mind. And when we think things, sometimes we can lie to ourselves quite a bit. But when we say them out loud, it, the BS meter goes off a little bit quicker. So I think we're more inclined to give ourselves a little bit more credit out loud than we do in our own inner unsaid voices.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that too. I think we all need reminders. We all need reminders. Sometimes we know these things, but we just don't think about them, or we don't remind ourselves. And just like I said with the why read question, it's easy to get distracted by so many other influences in our lives to keep us away from picking up a book. But sometimes we also just need to be reminded of what matters. And so I think that that's incredibly valuable. And it looks like a lot of people in the chat here agree.
Yep.
And so Rick the Reader says, beautifully
Oh,
said,
thank you.
Brian. Yeah, and Vera says, "I'd love to read Brian's reflective autobiography now. The way he speaks is wow." Yes, agree. And Jenny Wirtz is here in the chat, and she says here, "I love the one for the
Crazy.
road. It is a BookTube highlight." So,
Thank you,
yeah.
Janny.
Mhm.
I have to say, I mean, like, of all, and you guys are wonderful, but the fact that I get to have any interaction with Janny Words is just
Crazy.
Yeah.
mind
Yeah.
boggling. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it really is. And the fact that I didn't realize until I started the channel who she's married to. And here I am with The Shadow of the Torture being one of my favorite all-time book covers ever
Such a good
painted.
cover.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. And it's like, oh my God, that's her husband. Oh,
Yeah,
this
so if
is like
any of you
they're
who don't know that, Janie Wirtz is married to Don
Don Mates. Yeah.
Mates, who's the artist of the Book of the New Sun cover and a lot of other covers too, right? She's a
Lots
famous
of them.
fantasy author or
Yeah.
artist, yes.
Talk
And
about the
Jenny Wirtz
fantasy.
herself is also an incredible artist and does all the cover
Yes.
art to her own books.
They are the fantasy power couple, if ever there was one.
Yeah, fantastic. And then here, Sci-Fi Finds has another message, another question here. Do you ever get affected by negative comments? Um,
What negative comments? Like this is a really good part of YouTube to put yourself out on. Like it's actually very gracious, and I can't count on one hand the amount of negative sentiment I've gotten from anyone. Luckily, not that it
Yeah.
doesn't happen or that it won't happen. I try not to think about that, and I try and use the perspective of how much positivity there is versus the few negative opinions or comments. Maybe that just helps me quickly outweigh it and not put too much emphasis on it. But I really can't think of one comment that has hurt me that way. I don't. Maybe I've been lucky. I don't know. What about you guys?
I would say for me, I'm kind of on, Team Theo's answer over here that I can't really off the top of my head think about anything overly negative, but my background is so volatile that a negative comment on a YouTube video to me is nothing. I have had people tell me they're coming back tomorrow morning to shoot my bar up, to take me out. I mean, just like
What?
oh
Wow.
my gosh, yes. I've had a million kinds of weirdo threats like that in my life. It's just
Mm,
when you have to kick people out of a bar when they don't want to get kicked out of a bar, lots of times you're going to get, some pretty
Yeah.
heavy threats. It's a lot worse than a negative comment on a BookTube channel.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
my spine has become a little bit more steeled than, from the experiences of that all. I assume I'll be getting some negative comments sooner or later. It's just the nature of the
That
beast.
means you've
But
made it. That means you've made it.
yeah,
The most
that's
negative comment I got that really broke my heart was I was reviewing a book and they said, "Oh, wonderful review, but stop moving the book so much." And I said, "Oh, sorry, like my Greek is showing. Like it is what it is. I just
that's
talk I
awesome.
talk with my hands and I move stuff around, and so that's about as bad as it gets. Who cares?"
Yeah. Yeah. I would, as we say here in Minnesota, water off a duck's back. It is no big deal. Everybody has
Totally.
an opinion. And you know what? To
And they're
try
all
to give
entitled
it,
to them as well.
yeah, and
Like it is
we
what it
all
is.
have crappy days too. And maybe it's just that person's having a crappy day and they
Mhm.
decided that that's how they're taking it out. And maybe if I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, maybe later on that day they regret, doing something,
Totally.
putting something so negative out there into the ether. So
Yeah.
wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, and
Yeah. Don't worry
that's
about it.
this is another true thing.
That
You
is
can't
true.
block people.
I've
Yes.
never had to, but it's good to
Me
know it's
neither.
there.
Yeah.
I have had
Yeah.
some that have come up actually in the Y Read chat in the past, but fortunately today's chat's been awesome. So thank you to the chat today. And I've in the past, fortunately, been able to recruit Evie now and then when she's available to help monitor that. But everything is good now. And oh, we have Jared here who says, "Good idea to just shrug and move on when you get bad comments or hate mail. Your time is too precious to care about them."
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just always worth noting that. I like what Vera says here that Richard's philosophy from two to ramble, a comment from someone who knows you for 15 minutes shouldn't affect you because they ultimately don't know you. It if it does reflect why it did, if it does reflect why it did. Yeah. So it's a good point.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have been at it for just over an hour and a half, and I know that you all have things to do on your Saturday. And I just want to thank you both so much for joining me for this episode of Why Read. It's been a pleasure to have Theo back on Why Read and back on BookTube. And it's also been wonderful to celebrate that here with Brian from BellTube. one of my favorite channels that I've discovered over this past year. When did you start your channel, Brian? Was it the
November
end of last?
7th. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. The end of last year.
So
Um,
about, is that like
That's
8 months ago,
amazing.
9 months ago,
That's
something like
amazing.
that.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
You're killing it.
Yes, absolutely. And I love all you in the chat, like John
What a
and
good comment section. Thank you so much, guys.
yes,
What
Oh,
a
yeah.
good
this is the best. The
Duck, duck,
conversation drivers.
duck, duck,
Yeah.
duck, gray duck, Bex. She's asking where you sit in a circle and get chased by a pig. Duck, duck, gray duck. Everybody else calls it duck, duck, goose. Except for in Minnesota, it's duck, duck, gray duck. Don't ask me why. We're weird here.
That's funny.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. And yes, and I'll go ahead and shout out the next episode of Why Read is going to happen in September. We're looking at September 7th right now. We're hoping that we can stay with that date, but I'll go ahead and announce now that I'm going to be having Vera here on my channel since she's here in the chat.
Amazing.
I'm
Oh,
gonna have
cool.
Vera and Tom Orange for the next episode of
Sweet.
Why Read. So I hope you all join for that one. It's going to be a wonderful conversation. And thank you again for everyone who showed up today. This was wonderful. Thank you so much, Theo. Thank you so much,
Thank
Brian.
you for having me. What a
Yeah.
privilege. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
I mean, you guys, thank you for inviting me. And this is just such a great opportunity for me to get to know Theo before I bombard him with questions sometime on another
I can't wait.
episode.
Yeah.
Yes.
When Joanna asked me, I was so thrilled to come back. And then she said I was going to be on with Brian. I was like, you got it. Like anytime. I was so excited. So
That's
yeah.
always the response I want whenever
Yeah.
Oh, of
I
course.
invite two people. I'm like, I want them to be excited that they're going to get to talk.
Oh, we're
with you.
best friends now. You can't help it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
John,
Yeah.
you're out, brother. Sorry. I'm bringing Theo on, man. That's
Yeah.
it. John,
To hell with
sorry,
the
buddy.
tingle. You're out of here.
Yeah, Tingle Man. Tingle Man. Sorry, brother. Nah, of course not. You guys
Oh,
rock. This has been a total blast. Honestly, this is just everything I
Yeah.
hope this conversation would be for sure.
Me
Oh.
too. I love you guys.
Love you too. All right. Thank you guys. Have a great
Bye.
one.
Thanks for joining us. Bye.